Hello, I'm Donald Leggatt and welcome to the latest focusIR CEO interview. I'm joined by Gordon Stein, Chief Financial Officer at CleanTech Lithium, the AIM-listed lithium explorer developer who currently have 3 active projects in the Chilean Andes and who have just announced 2 new licenses in the Atacama. Gordon joins me now to discuss the financials and routes to funding for the project and to join the dots on CleanTech's strategy. Welcome, Gordon. It's almost 5 months to the day since we spoke last now, and I realise how busy you've been since then.
I think you could say that. I've been CFO now of quite a number of companies over the last 20 years on AIM, and I think this has been the most intense last 6 months I've ever known. And because of the scale of what we've been doing in Chile and the progress we've made, I'm not really sure the market has really understood when you join the dots up what we've achieved. By the way, you mentioned 2 licenses there. We've acquired 116 new licenses, and I'll explain that later.
Please do, and apologies. And let's take us to those 2 positive scoping studies for the 2 main projects, Laguna Verde and now Fransisco Basin. Talk us through the economics of both. Are both projects similar in size, cost, scale, post-tax NPV, post-tax NRR, or are they subtly unique?
I think just before going into that, it's probably worth mentioning that Chile is the largest basin of lithium in the world. You know, it is the second largest producer at the moment, and it obviously looking to expand its footprint. And over the course of the last 18 months, we've probably been the most active company in Chile by an awful long way. You know, we've had effectively drilled 10 wells in 3 different basins. You can imagine the logistics of that. You know, in heights of up to 4,400 meters. This is interesting, difficult terrain to operate in. And, you know, we've drilled 10 wells. And as a result of that, we've managed to get on both projects the JORC resource up from, you know, a lower number to now 2.7 billion in total for those 2 assets, 2.7 million tons. And that 2.7 million tons, it translates into 2 very, very serious projects. It's probably worth mentioning that, you know, we're planning drilling campaigns over the coming months again, once the winter season is over, and that will look to expand that footprint. So 1.8 million tons on Laguna Verde, that's a 30-year life project in itself. That's pretty material. And then you've got Fransisco Basin, probably a year behind, but we're showing just short of a million, 920,000 tons. And, you know, that's at the moment showing about a 12-year project. So we'll be actively drilling, particularly on Fransisco Basin, 4 wells in the coming season to get that resource up again. So if you look at the economics, of incredibly attractive economics, even at conservative lithium sales prices. I mean, Laguna Verde we announced in January. That's looking at 400 million of basically around about $400 million US of capital, which in mining terms is not a significant sum of money, particularly given the resource you've got. We've got $1.8 billion of NPV at 8. And an IRR, you know, something at 45%. So really strong economics and a lithium price of $22,500 a ton, you know, which is well within the range of what, you know, the long-term projections are from all manner of analysts and so on. And then you've got Fransisco Basin. We announced the scoping study results only a couple of days ago. Again, really excited about that because it's about a year behind, and it's driven by obviously the resource we've got at the moment. But, you know, with half that resource measured and indicated, the consultancy firm that did this study came up with a 12-year program. We think we can get that through extra drilling to 20 years, but even the 12-year program shows economics of 1.1 billion NPV, and then you add on an IRR of 43%. These are really strong economics, and I'm not really sure the market adds those 2 together. You're looking at $3 billion on 2 projects, which we can move forward over the next few years towards production. And we're in a really good place to do that. So pretty excited by what we've got. And obviously we'll take those projects forward and hopefully expand those numbers more significantly.
Talking about taking the projects forward, what are the catalytic events that come between now and production in 2026 for Laguna and 2027 for Fransisco Basin?
It's following a normal path that you would follow with exploration and appraisal and then development companies. We've got the scoping study, in fact, the PFS for Laguna Verde is well advanced. That's Worley, that's an international firm doing that study and delving into all sorts of things. So that we would hope to see that coming out in Q1 next year. That's a pretty extensive piece of work because that's the point at which you can open up conversations with with strategic parties or off-takers, people who want to secure supply of lithium. And there's a huge demand for that, and I'll come back to that later. And then you've also got the pilot plant. Probably worth mentioning, we're the only company in Chile. I mean, Chile has announced, and we'll talk about it later, the National Lithium strategy. But one of the pillars of that is all new projects have to be using DLE or something equivalent. We're probably the most advanced company in Chile, probably by a long way, on that DLE front. We actually introduced it to the government last December. I was in the meeting. So all the companies now, from Albemarle to SQM to other players, are all scrabbling around trying to catch up on DLE. We've got a pilot plant that we've got, been assembled already in our warehouse in Copiapó. The shipments is on the seas at the moment. For the second part of that's coming from Belgium, from Sunres's facility in Belgium, and we would look to be commissioning that over the next few weeks. So that is to produce 1 ton of battery grade lithium per month, which we would then obviously use to optimize our processes, but also use to send to off-takers, strategic parties. And these are car companies, battery manufacturers. You've got international traders all watching what we're doing, waiting for. So once you've got the PFS and you've got the first results and you've got product coming out of that pilot plant, that's when you'll see an interest. And then the next catalyst event is going to be the seals, which I'll come to later. They are a prize position, which is basically the production permits or the operating permits we get. And then you go through a series of other exercises. You've obviously got to get your DFS, which is to get your banks on board. Hopefully, towards the latter part of next year, we'll be bringing strategic partners on board. And, that's the big point where, how are you going to bring them on? There's different ways you can do that, whether it's there's a minority partner in one of your subsidiary companies, or you bring them on in other ways. So, our chairman's done this before. He did it in copper in Collahuasi, the biggest or second biggest copper mine in the world, pulling together a syndicate of parties that'll help you fund this with their banking facilities and all other aspects. So I'm very comfortable. Then from that, you move into the feed stage. You've got your environmental approvals. Our environmental process started 18 months ago, and that is now moving forward beyond baseline and so on. It's quite a rigid process you have to follow in Chile. So we're following all those routes. We're ticking all the boxes. We're getting all the permits. And we are in a very good position in Chile, and I'll talk to you later about what the government thinks and where we are fitting in with that. So, and then you eventually get into the construction phase. People think 2026 is a long way off. It's actually quite short. Normally 7 to 10 years is not unusual in mining terms, because we've got Sunres as our main partner, and they build facilities in months and then ship them and construct them. They're doing that in Argentina at the moment on another project. We can effectively bring modular facilities across and build them and so on. Pilot plant will give us the information to help us feed that. So we've got a very nice active program. And I think our board, if you look at our boards, we've got a board there that's delivered major projects before. Steve's done 2 in Chile, biggest and second biggest copper mine in the world. I've been involved in major projects. And you look at the board, Aldo did 850 megawatts of solar in Chile. So we've got a board there to take the project forward and both projects forward into construction and into production. That's the plan. And we've now got a staffing of 20 to 25 in Chile. We've built up from 3 a year and a bit ago. They're all specialists in their own field. And I'm not sure there's any other company in our area, now certainly in our place in Chile, that's doing what we're doing in that sense. And then you look at Fransisco Basin, same again, pretty much a year behind. Once we've got this next drilling campaign done, we'll be kicking off the PFS, and then you're into all those other things as well. The interesting thing is how we merge the two, and do we merge the two in terms of funding and strategy? That'll be driven by the needs of what we hope is the off-takers, the buyers. I don't think we'll have any problem once we've got our production permits and we've got our PFS, and we can put evidence that we can produce battery-grade lithium. We won't have any problem securing off-take partners.
So I'm sure it'll be very useful for the audience, for the retail investors, to hear more about the timeline on the Sunres pilot plant. Is it possible just to talk us through how you hope all that will work into the near future? Is the disruptive technology, is it going to work? Is it working the way that you hope it will work? Will the pilot plant actually deliver that 1 million tons as you hope it will do?
Well, it's interesting. You call it disruptive technology. It is in the lithium space, but it's a technology that's been used in uranium and other industries for decades. Steve was doing it. Our chairman was doing it 40 years ago in Namibia in a uranium company, the biggest uranium facility in the world. So it's basically just using a resin to unlock what would normally take 18 months with the sun to do in evaporation ponds, using a process and a technology. It's actually well understood. We've Sun Resin are the biggest. They're a Chinese company, 4.5 billion market cap. They've spread their footprint around the world. They provide services, they provide equipment, and they provide resin. And they sell it. They don't want an equity stake. They don't want royalties. They provide equipment. And they've got a real niche there where they do this. They're doing a project in America on Anson Resources. They're doing one in Argentina. They have 4 operating projects in China. We've gone with a company who's actually able to do this. So I think working with these sort of companies who can do it modular, we can move this forward. But DLE is the new way. It has to be done in Chile. And, so there is a bit of a scrabbling to catch up in other companies. We're the only company in Chile today that has a pilot plant, operating pilot plant, that I'm aware of anyway. And it's being assembled at the moment. The first parts arrived, I think it was 3-4 weeks ago we announced that. Second parts are on the sea, as we say, and they should be arriving in the next near future. And then it's just commissioning, assembling and commissioning. So we would hope that would be up and running by the end of this year. And then you're into test mode, and there'll be inevitably some teething problems, but looking to see what product we get, and there'll be a phased build-up. But we'll have product relatively quickly, and then what we do with the product will depend on who wants to have a look at it and test it in their processes. But it's not that long off, we're pretty close now, and this is a year in the planning to get to this point, and the market really hasn't I think, given us the benefit of what we've actually got, both on those projects and the fact that we've got a pilot plant in Chile, and we are being watched. Aldo's at a conference at the moment in Brazil, and he's being approached by numerous people from Chile. We're saying everyone's watching us. They're all because of where we are and because of the activity we've been doing, the drilling we've been doing, and the announcements. We're the kind of vanguard in Chile of how we're moving this forward. So interesting place to be.
Let me ask you about offtake agreements. You've mentioned that 2 or 3 times now. Whereabouts are you with offtake agreements, and will the pilot plant be the catalyst for that as a next phase of development for the business?
Yes, I think. I mean, we've had some very big parties under NDA for quite some time now. We've even had people to site, and they are household names, and from all different parts of the world. So we've been keeping our heads down. We want to get to a point where we've got the scoping studies out, particularly on Laguna Verde. We've got a PFS, which hopefully has got a chunky number. And then you've got products from the pilot plant, which allows you then to go to these offtake partners. And again, I mentioned, you've got car companies now coming to space. They need to secure supply. You've got battery manufacturers, whether it's the South Koreans, the Chinese, etc. And then you've got the international traders. You've got companies like Rio Tinto coming to space. You have all these players maneuvering around looking for source supply. They want to secure supply for this EV revolution that's coming. And so if we can get to the point where we can evidence the value of our projects, and that we've got a team to deliver, we've got daily that's working, we will be having knocks on the door all over. And we expect that within the next 4 or 5 months, once we start to get the pilot plant up and running. And we won't be waiting for knocks. We'll be knocking on other people's door to want to play.
If you've got a very high quality output, your concentrate is high quality. Well, will that actually mean that you can charge more money for it?
There's an interesting debate going on about green and grey lithium. I mean, it's not a term you'll find written down, but it's a term that we tend to use. Green lithium being lithium that's done in a sustainable manner and where you are actually trying to keep your footprint as low as possible. Hard rock mining, no one can defend that as being environmentally friendly, because you're shipping, tons of stuff over the ocean, having taken out of a hole in the ground, with all the CO2 that goes with that. But yet, on the other hand, you've got the evaporation ponds, which certainly are not environmentally friendly. They're certainly not good for the water table and communities. These are vast areas of basically depleting water into the air. Whereas DLE is a 1 to 2 day process. It's probably worth mentioning, there's probably about 20 companies around the world that are all doing DLE, in China, in the US, in Canada, in Germany, in the UK, and they're all doing it in different ways. And you have to adapt your DLE process to the brine. Each brine is different. So you have to find the right resin for the brine, and then you adapt it. And so the resin we use for Laguna Verde will probably be different from the resin we use for Fransisco Basin, because different brines, different qualities. So that'll be part of the process of the pilot testing where we use the pilot, not just for Laguna Verde, but for Fransisco Basin and for any other projects we have going. So it's going to be interesting the next few months with the offtake conversations, how that all plays out.
Yeah, that's really interesting, Gordon. Okay, let's take us to Llamara. Llamara is a wee bit on the back burner. I don't see so much a news flow around Llamara. Would it be fair to say that you haven't quite discovered the quality or the quantity of lithium which you were hoping for in the brines there?
Llamara is an interesting one. I mean, one thing which we announced, well, put in our interims, is that we've now doubled our footprint, nearly doubled our footprint in Llamara. So we had 344 square kilometres. When I last talked to you, we've now got 605 square kilometres. I mean, that's expanded our footprint for all manner of good tactical and strategic reasons. So that is now logged. And we've had our first, I mean, we had 2 wells we've drilled. And the first one, would you believe it, we struck gas. I mean, this is an area where had been drilled half a dozen times previously, maybe 20 years ago, for an oil and gas play. Found nothing. We hit gas. And so we had to plug and abandon that, safety reasons, and it moved on to another area. And then we drilled to 500 meters, which is where we'd planned to. And it is fair to say that the grade of the lithium was not what we hoped in those upper areas. But as we got deeper and deeper, we were starting to see, and you'll see that from the press release, you'll start to see the grade getting, better and better. So, and there's also surface evaporites, there's lithium on the surface. So we've sent various data and various samples to the lab. We haven't got them back yet. There's a lab, I say crisis. There's a lab issue in Chile and in America at the moment because everyone's sending product. So we're waiting for those results. But, it's fair to say, we'll be looking at the deeper areas. We had a 500-meter well. We could potentially look at going deeper. And it's an exploration play, greenfield. You know how exploration works, Donald. You don't always go with the first well. You spread your footprint. So remember, we've drilled 6 wells at Laguna Verde, and we've drilled, another 6 wells at Fransisco Basin. All learnings, all process. So Llamara is still very much part of our story, and we will continue to work that. And we would maybe looking to do it.
So you think the Llamara play might well be a deeper
It could be, and actually. We did see, on the geophysics, we did see signs, but we it's a process with these exploration plays. I think the key thing to mention is our focus 100% is on the main 2 projects. That's what drives our business, and that's what the shareholders want. Llamara is a potential upside, and we will continue to work Llamara, and we'll probably look at drilling another well next year. We haven't made that decision yet, but it would make sense based on the data we're seeing, and that will take a number of thoughts. So we've doubled our footprint. There's a message there. So that that's the 3rd project. We've got 2 projects and another one which we could potentially use. So again, we look at our peers in country who've got 1 project and are doing all that risk goes through 1 project. We've got 4 now, and they're all at different paces. So as a company, we've got a very nice portfolio now that investors can invest in to see upside in lots of different ways.
And when you say 4, is the 4th one those 160 licenses that you told me about in the Atacama? Is that what you're?
Yeah, I think the market will be kind of surprised by this. We announced that this morning. It's 116 licenses, and it's 377. Yeah, 377 square kilometers. It's big. Salar de Atacama, the biggest play in the world by a long way. It's 25% of the world's production comes from the Salar de Atacama, from SQM and Albemarle, who've been doing that for a number of years. And they rent from the state, from Corfu, which is an organisation of the state. They rent and have a license period or a concession period for periods of time. So you've got SQM till 2030 and Albemarle. So, and they produce, and they have evaporation ponds and one of it. We were approached in June with the opportunity to get a stake there, and we couldn't quite understand how and why it was available, but it'd been missed. So we grabbed the opportunity, and so very quietly we acquired the licenses, and as a result of that, they've been registered with the authorities, and we've already started technical work. If you've got registration, you can do geophysical work and so on licenses. So we've had a team out there, and the team's come back with some very interesting TEM. It's a geophysical process studies, and we've got that in our RNS. Some really interesting results. By the way, we're next door to SQM, which is the biggest producer in the world. So what have we got? We don't know.
Can I just stop you there, Gordon? How on earth did you manage to get 116 licenses under the nose of Albemarle and SQM, the largest producer in the world? How did that happen?
I think we've asked that question as well. I mean, we saw an opportunity, and the board was scratching its head, saying, "Why, why aren't they?" And they've got a massive footprint already. So I think maybe whether they're happy with the footprint they've got, or whether they don't want to expand further, I don't know. But we took the opportunity as a board. It was a quick decision. Let's just take it and see what we've got. And for a small piece of cost at the moment, we've got some very good geophysical data, which is very interesting. Where does it fit in our portfolio? It's another upside. It won't focus as Laguna Verde, Fransisco Basin, but we'll look at this, and suddenly we're in another play is the biggest play in the world. DLE is the way all companies have to do. Any new projects have to be DLE. We're really a good place to bring DLE to that region. We've got pilot plant, and we know how to do it. So, and with 340 or 77 square kilometers, we can re-inject other places. We've got the ability. So our processes could work there. So we're not going to wave our arms around too much, but we've now got a stake in the biggest producing area of the world at the moment. So interesting new development, I think, which will just add to the portfolio.
Let me take you to the National Lithium strategy. When I started dealing with the CleanTech Lithium, the National Lithium strategy simply didn't exist. Seals didn't exist. And an awful lot has happened in the last 2 or 3 years, to be fair. So what are these seals that you've actually applied for, and why do you think they're going to be a game changer?
I'm not sure the market's worked out what we've actually done here, and the implications of what we've done here. I mean, we actually submitted seals 18 months ago, and these are pretty extensive documents. I mean, the one we submitted for Laguna Verde, it's over 1,000 pages. This is not something you put together in 5 minutes. This is what are your projects, what resource you got, how did you find it, what are you planning to do with the resource, how are you going to solve on ENIA, and then working with the local communities. It's a complete story of we want to move forward towards an operating license. So step back, the Chile state owns all lithium rights in country, and it licenses out or it rents out licenses effectively or contracts to players to do that. In the strategic play, the Salar de Atacama and Maracunga, they have a rented agreement with SQM and Albemarle, this is Corfu, and they're allowed to produce on those licenses for a period of time. I've mentioned the dates, and that's the way that works. On the non-strategic play, you have to apply for what's called an operating contract, and that's CEOL in Spanish, CEOL. And so you basically apply for an operating license. Once you've got that block and you've got it, you can produce. I mean, it's a gold dust because it means you've got the ability to extract and produce lithium. It's probably worth mentioning there's one CEOL in the country at the moment. That's Codelco, and we are the first company to apply after the National Lithium strategy. So we submitted those a couple of weeks ago. What we do know is they've been extremely well received by the local communities, which is a first in Chile, we think. They will come out publicly, I think, on that soon. They've been well received by Corfu, who, give the licenses. We hit the time when the new mining minister is just in place. So I understand that our organisation is pleased because they want to demonstrate to the world that Chile's open for business or move forward. So going back to National Lithium strategy, I think the government recognises it got its messaging wrong. The world saw nationalisation. That was never mentioned. Once the headline got out there, it was like Pandora's box. You couldn't put it back in again. And the government spent the last few months saying, no, public-private partnerships. The strategic players, yes, we have to have a majority stake. We're not in any strategic play. Although our Atacama license would end up there. I mean, that's fine. But all our other licenses...
A minority stake? You mean, Gordon, a minority stake? We have to have a minority stake,
yes? No, we could in theory take our projects forward 100%, but it makes sense for us to talk to government. I mean, the way the government's looked at it is it wants to embrace public-private partnerships. And actually, we think that's a good thing because if you do that in the right way... I mean, in ARMI, for example, the company we've approached, I had meetings with an ARMI, with our CEO and chairman last December, long before the National Lithium strategy was discussed, and sent some documentation to them and invited them in. Why? Because the ARMI looks after the smaller players in terms of all sorts of mining. And they can open doors. They can help you in your processes and your environmental, and having them working alongside us, we see as just a win-win. So when we saw the National Lithium strategy and we managed to evidence that clearly we're not strategic, then it's about how do we arrange that? How do we work with government to do that? So in the submission on the sales, we said we would welcome an army coming in. And the army's done a couple of joint ventures before, one in copper, and that's still live. That's 10%. They have a 10% stake. That's pretty material, actually, in terms of the profits they're receiving from that. And another one, an next one.
And how is their copper stake gone? How has that all worked out?
No, it's fine. It's been going for a number of years, and they're a 10% holder, and they take quite nice revenues from that as part of that whole revenue stream across the whole business. So we would look to have conversations, set a joint venture up. It's a standard process. I mean, I've done it in oil and gas for 30 years. So we would look to work with an army in that. And so the seals are your ability to operate and sell and produce lithium. And if we get a seal, and we hope to have a 3 to 6 months from when we put the applications in, if we get the approval on that, then we'd be the first company, the new one, to have seals. And then suddenly you're talking to strategics with a seal at hand. Here's your PFS, and oh, by the way, here's the product. Would you like to play? So the seal is a big thing, and I'm not really sure the market understood it. We're ahead of the crowd. We first mover on this. And the board made a big call. Do we do it yet? Or do we wait? We would no. Let's move. So the seals are a big thing, and actually in country it's been noticed big time. People are watching, and we are being. Aldo was approached.
You think you might have a result for a seal in perhaps 6 months?
The process isn't timelined, although I do know that the mining ministry is already setting up the committees and whatever to review it. So but moving forward on this, so they could have said no. They've not done that. I would have forced the market announcement. We've not done that, and we're moving forward. I mean, all we hear is positive signs that they embrace this, because this is an opportunity to tell the world that they're open for business. They'll help private companies take projects forward, and with us looking to work with an army, it's a win-win as far as we're concerned. So we're pretty excited.
And what would you bring? What do you bring to the partnership, and what do an army bring to the partnership? Presumably you both have strengths.
Well, we bring the technological skill. We've got the licenses at the moment. We've got the job resource. We've got the value of where we're taking the project. We've got some resin we can bring in terms of taking a project all the way to production. They'll bring the government relationship, the ability to open doors, the help in the regulatory processes, and also, yes, if they end up with a 10% stake, that's what they'll get. But we're discussing the mechanics of how that whole thing goes forward, and we see it as a positive and a win-win. And actually, I would reiterate, we made this proposal long before the National Lithium strategy, and that's just a fact.
A very useful fact, to be fair. Let's move on. Let's move on now, Gordon, and talk to me about the pathway to production for both those big projects, Laguna, Verde and Fransisco, if you will, please. Both will need large sums of debt and equity, as ever, to be raised. Does that faze you at all?
No, because I think, as I've explained before, we've got a timeline to go through this. So next year will be very interesting. When we've got the data sufficient that we're comfortable to talk to the strategic parties, and that's where we go back to the people we have under NDA, and we open the door to various other players. And there's been tentative inquiries, and we know a lot of people are watching. And once you get to a certain point with your PFS and so on, you've then got a much stronger position to talk to people, and particularly when you've got product they can actually look at and see how that works either in our cars or in our batteries or whatever. So I suspect we'll be doing quite a bit of traveling, but Steve's done this. Steve did this with Kaiwasi and put together a consortium of Japanese equity players, and they brought the banks to bear. So the whole funding package came pretty much from that consortium. And the plan is to use a similar model. We're working with our brokers and working with other specialists, there'll be debt specialists and so on. We think that about 60 to 70% of this could be debt funded. The economics are incredibly strong. You're looking at paybacks of 1.5 years to 2.5 years, relatively moderate lithium prices. So you put it all together, it's quite an compelling package for parties. And you're seeing you're seeing, Tesla getting into companies and buying downstream plants. You've got Stellantis, you've got General Motors, Ford, desperately trying to secure supply. So we'll have some interesting conversations. And another thing, Maha Dowdy, who's one of our board directors who we brought in, she sat on the board of Trafigura and she ran their copper desk with 70 people working for her. She spent 3-4 years traveling the world, putting offtake agreements together, in the hundreds of millions. So her book is quite extensive, and actually she's leading. Interestingly, she's leading a team we're taking to China in the next 3 weeks. She's off with Aldo to meet with Sunresin at the powers that be there to talk through the way forward and working together. So I'm not saying we would look to raise funds in China, but there are lots of avenues, particularly in the Far East and the US, particularly with the Inflation Reduction Act and with the European Union coming up with new plays now. We've got live conversations going on there, and we'll see where it goes. But it's going to be an interesting year, looking at what the best deal is for us and the shareholders.
Now, let me ask a cheeky question, Gordon. Do you think that your tonnage, that your projects are sufficiently big to attract those offtake agreements, those household names that you've been telling me about?
Yes, 20,000 tonnes for 2 projects each is pretty substantial. And that's what we've done the scoping studies on. These fields have got potential to do much more than that. So whether it gets to 20 or 30,000 tonnes, I mean, you see projects in Argentina aiming for 50,000 tonnes in 2 stages. So that is material. That is, millions of cars, batteries for millions of cars. And so we've got a really interesting scenario where this is scale. Some countries don't produce what we will be producing when we get our projects to production. So the project's got the potential of doing much more than that. We'll do it in stages. And obviously, depending on the nature of the parties, if somebody brings more money to bear, we can move faster. Some of these companies are household names. And those sort of funds, not an issue whatsoever if they can secure supply. So we've got some real volume. That's before you think about Llamara and before you think about the Atacama. They're just upside. So interesting.
Okay, we're coming to the end of our chat here, Gordon. Now, to be honest, I don't often talk to companies directly about share price. It's sort of slightly frowned upon. But I do understand that CleanTech seem to be undervalued relative to their peers. People on the boards are endlessly talking about a ceiling of around 60 pence. The share price is around 48p today. What are your thoughts on that? Give us your point of view on that.
I scratch my head at times because, what we've got is, I'd ask shareholders to stand back and look at where we are as a company. We've got a substantial resource in Chile, 2.7 billion tonnes. We've been by miles and away the most active company in the lithium space in Chile in the last few years, drilling 10 wells. Nobody's done anywhere near that. We've got 25 staff in Chile today. That's a lot more than some of our peers. And these are specialists in all manner of things, from to DLE specialists to project and so on. So we're ticking the box on all of that. We've got 4 projects, not one. We've got 4 projects which are moving forward at different pace, all with potential, and we can mix and match and so on. We've got a pilot plant which is now being commissioned or will be commissioned in the very near future. Nobody else has got one of those that we're aware of. No, there are service companies offering services, but we've got one, so we can use it for our different projects. We've got potential strategic conversations coming down the line. We're the only company that's applied for a sale. We've applied for 2 sales, one over 1,000 pages, one over 500 pages. We're in active dialogue with government. We're following the lithium strategy, doing DLE, which is what the government insists people do. So we're in a very, very good place. We're effectively first mover, and we're being watched. So in Chile, we're a kind of big thing now, and we're being watched. And I'm not really sure the market's worked out how good a position we're in compared to some of our peers who, you see market caps doubling. I've seen that in the last couple of days on things, and I just scratch my head at times. And just say to shareholders, the next few months is going to be really interesting. I think, we'll talk about catalysts, but there's going to be a lot of news flow as we move our projects forward and we start to get that point where we're going to be talking to strategic. So I think there's an interesting opportunity for shareholders and for investors to look at us and say, what is different about us and why should you invest in us? And I think I've laid some of those out. I think personally, we're miles ahead of other players in Chile, in the biggest basin in the world.
Okay, talking of catalysts, why invest is my final question. why might now be a good time to think of adding CleanTech Lithium, CTL, to each investor's watch list? Why would now be an appropriate moment?
Because the share price is only 48p. And our brokers are talking about, they're talking anything up to £4 a share. So there's a multiple there. Now, you obviously we've got to deliver on certain things to get there. But, we're ticking boxes. You look at what we've done over the last 6 months. I talked about intensity. I mean, you wouldn't believe the workload going on behind the scenes and the weekly meetings and how this is all shaping up. And, ticking boxes, scoping studies done, PFS underway, EIA moving forward. And we are literally in conversation with government, and actually another key thing is the local communities. One of the barriers to moving forward in Chile and lots of other places is the if you don't engage with local communities and bring them with you, you end up with blockages. Things stop and they don't happen. Our local communities in both those major projects are 100 kilometers away. They're down the mountains. We still travel through them and on our way there. So we've actually engaged with them. We've had them to site. We've had them to looked at the pilot plant, the demo plant we've got in Copiapó. It's been running for a few months, and we engage with them. We send people out there. I mean, we are also talking about community relations programs, and we're not just doing it to say that. It actually helps us doing that. So I think probably for the first time in Chile, we're going to have some communities who've been quite vociferous in the past, saying this is how you need to do it. And I think you might find in the next few days some communities coming out and saying that publicly. So I think we put it all together. We're in a good place to move forward with our pilot plan and with our drilling programs coming up and with our PFS and with our COL applications. It's tick, tick, tick. And if you actually look at what we said we were going to do at the beginning of the year, we've done it all. Admittedly, some behind schedule. I mean, we're obviously aiming towards an ASX listing. Paperwork and that is pretty intensive, way beyond what I had expected. Well, we're getting there. And so we'll continue that process. So a lot of events and a lot of catalysts over the coming months. And, as a company, we're pretty excited about where we are. And with the board we've got now, we've got a board that can take us all the way to production. It's a hell of a board. And I think I'm pretty excited to be on it.
Gordon Stein, CFO at CleanTech Lithium, thank you so much for your, I'm not sure it was simply an operational update. It was a fantastic perspective on the commercial opportunities for direct extraction lithium and for CTL in Chile. Thank you. That was absolutely fantastic. For more free company information and data about CleanTech Lithium, please go to London Southeast. The CTL page is on London Southeast indeed. And meanwhile, do follow us on Twitter. Our Twitter account is at London Southeast. And for our own one, that's at _focusIR_. We are now an IR consultancy. And I do register on London Southeast YouTube if you want to see more interviews like this and receive alerts on CleanTech interviews. Thank you very much indeed for watching.